Hello students, we are discussing about house rent allowance and we already solved 3 problems relating to that. In this session, let us solve 2 more problems relating to calculation of taxable house rent allowance. See this problem. During the previous year, Mr. Balu received the following emoluments. Emoluments is nothing but a salary. Basic rupees 20,500 per month. DA 25% of basic considered as retirement benefit. Remember one thing, if DA is not mentioned as retirement benefit, you should not consider it as retirement benefit and you should not consider it for the calculation of salary purpose. Only if they mention it as retirement benefit, you have to consider. If not, don't consider DA for the purpose of retirement benefit and for the purpose of calculation of salary. This is very important. Next, commission rupees 50,000, HRA, that is house rent allowance, rupees 5,250 per month. The rent actually paid for the house at Bangalore was rupees 6,000 per month till 31st January 2020 when he shifted his residence to his own house. Find out taxable HRA. Here you have to calculate taxable house rent allowance of Mr. Balu for the relevant period. See here, basic is given and 25% of basic is considered as DA, that is for retirement benefit purpose, and here commission 50,000 is given, but it is not mentioned as commission as a percentage of turnover or sales. That means you should not consider commission for the calculation of salary. Only if they mention it as percentage of sales, you have to consider commission, or else you just ignore the commission. Here you should not consider commission because it is not as a percentage of sale, and HRA is given and the rent actually paid also there, that is 6,000 per month. See, this point is very important, till 31st January 2020. After that he shifted his residence to his own house. That means here for the purpose of calculation of exempted HRA under section 10 subsection 13A, you have to consider house rent allowance only for the relevant period. Relevant period is a period in which he is living in the residential house, that is rented residential house. Once he shifted to his own house or once he shifted to the place where he is not paying any rent, then you should not consider that HRA for that period as exempted HRA. Here HRA is tax free or exempted from tax only for the period in which he is living in the rented house. Remember that point. And this HRA amount varies when he transferred to another place. When he transfers to another place, first you have to consider HRA which he is receiving in the previous employment, and then you have to consider the different HRA. Let us solve one problem relating to that also. See here, exempted HRA you have to consider only for 10 months, that is from 1st April to 31st January, and actual HRA received, first you are writing, right, that you have to consider for 12 months. Let us solve the problem so you can understand it better. See here, computation of HRA of Mr. Balu for the assessment year 2020-21. HRA received, here you have to consider for 12 months. First HRA received, that is 5,250. For 12 months you have to consider, that amounts to rupees 63,000. Next see, less exempt under section 10 subsection 13A, least of the following you have to consider, that is actual HRA received for the relevant period. As I told you, exempted HRA for a relevant period. Here he is living in the rented house for 10 months. for that 10 months period, you have to consider actual HRA received, that is 5,250 into 10, that is 52,500. Next, see rent paid above 10% of salary. For this calculation, see the notes. Excess rent paid over 10% of salary, that is salary is equal to 10 months basic plus DA 25% of basic, that is 20,500 for 10 months, because here exempted HRA you have to consider for relevant period, that is for the period in which he is living in the rented house. Remember this point, don't forget this point. That is why you are considering salary for 10 months only. And also DA 25% of 20,500 for 10 months, not for 12 months. Here both are for 10 months. So that amounts to rupees 2,56,250. So the excess rent paid over 10% of salary amounts to rupees 6,000 for 10 months he is paying rent, minus 2,56,250. 10% of that amounts to rupees 25,625. So the excess rent paid is 34,375. So that amount you have to write here. Next, 40% of salary for the relevant period, that is salary you already calculated, that is 2,56,250. 40% of that amounts to rupees 1,02,500. Here least of the following you have to consider as exempted amount of HRA, that is rent paid above 10% of salary, that is 34,375. When you deduct this 34,375 from actual HRA received for the year 63,000, you get taxable HRA as 28,625. That is your taxable HRA. Go through this problem once again and solve this problem by yourself. This is very important, that is calculation of exempted amount of HRA for the relevant period, that is the period in which he is living in the rented house. Okay. Let us solve one more problem relating to that is similar problem. Sarathi's basic is rupees 6,300 per month, DA rupees 1,800 per month and HRA rupees 1,500 per month. He stayed in a rented house paying a rent of rupees 2,000 per month till 31st December when he shifted his residence to his newly built house. Find out the taxable HRA. See this problem. Sarathi's basic is 6,300 per month and DA 1,800. See, in this problem, nowhere it is mentioned that DA is retirement benefit. So, you should not consider DA for the purpose of calculation of salary. In the previous problem, that is particularly mentioned that DA is considered as retirement benefit. But in this problem, nowhere it is mentioned. So, your salary means only basic, that is only 6,300 per month. Don't consider DA of 1,800 because it is not a retirement benefit. Okay. And HRA 1,500 per month, and he stayed in the rented house paying rent of rupees 2,000 per month till 31st December. That means he is living in the rented house only for 9 months. And then he shifted to his own house. So, here exempted HRA for the relevant period, the period in which he is living in the rented house. You have to calculate taxable HRA. See the calculation. Computation of HRA of Mr. Sarathi for the assessment year 2020-21, particular and 2 amounts column. Actual HRA received, here you have to consider for 12 months, that is 1,500 into 12, that amounts to rupees 18,000, less exempt under section 10 subsection 13A, least of the following you have to consider, that is actual HRA received for the relevant period, that is 1500 for 9 months, that is from April to December. For 9 months he is living in the rented house. That is why you have to consider HRA only for 9 months here. That amounts to rupees 13,500. Or rent paid above 10% of salary for the relevant period. See the calculation. Excess rent paid over 10% of salary, 2,000 for 9 months less rent paid, from rent paid you have to deduct 10% of salary, that is 6,300 rupees for 9 months. 10% of that you have to calculate, that is rent paid 18,000, from that 10% of salary of 9 months amounts to rupees 5,670. So the excess rent paid over 10% of salary amounts to rupees 12,330 rupees. So that amounts to rupees 12,330. Go through this calculation, solve it by yourself, then you will understand it. Next, 40% of salary for the relevant period, that is 6,300 salary for 9 months, that is 40% of that amounts to rupees 22,680. Here least of the following you have to consider. Here least is rent paid above 10% of salary. When you deduct that from actual HRA received for the year, you get taxable HRA 5,670 rupees. That is your taxable HRA. Here you can claim exemption for the relevant period only, that is the period in which he is living in the rented house, and the remaining HRA amount is fully taxable. Okay. This is the problem relating to computation of HRA for the relevant period. Thank you. Let us solve some more problems in the next session.